Well, I will say welcome to the world. I am Connor, Community Manager at Fusion, and I am joined by Kim from Mendability. And here we are at InnoPeaks in Martigny, and I'm very glad you could be joining me. And I'm very interested in asking you a bunch of things, but so we go through it the right way, maybe you could tell me and tell viewers in a nutshell what it is that Mendability does.
We have a treatment program for neurological disorders, and it's easy enough that anybody can do it at home with their kids or with their parents with Alzheimer's or autism, and it's all clinically validated and it's very effective.
So what I noticed, which was very big with Mendability, is that you encourage very much for this kind of treatment to be done with the family, and whether it be a mother or a son, or it's connected with the family as it is with the treatment. With this kind of treatment, is there a very big difference then with kind of administering some sort of therapy like this with the family instead of the doctor? Have you noticed kind of a big difference there?
If you have a professional that goes into the home and he's paid to do it every day, he's going to do it every day. But there's something that happens when a family member is doing it that just never can happen quite as well with a professional, and that's the human connection, the caring component. This is a very natural, non-invasive approach. Sometimes we say it's all about bringing back the basics. You know, there's going to be some smelling, some touching, some enjoying some music, some balancing exercises. And if you can do that in an environment where you feel safe and loved, then you can engage with the experience and you can get through that therapeutic threshold, and it makes the exercise just that much more effective. Mm-hmm. If you're doing this with a professional who's a bit technical and does it very well on paper, then the kid may not necessarily engage with the experience and get the full benefits. So,
do you find sometimes that, if let's take the example of a parent and a child with autism, for example, does the parent maybe have a bit better of an understanding of where the child's progressing and improving than a professional that's coming into the home?
Yes. I mean, you have the biggest benefit for the parent is that and that's what they tell us. They tell us that they can finally connect and create a bond with that child. Even if they do the exercise wrong, just trying to engage creates that connection with the child that they didn't know how to before. Mm-hmm. This idea of empowerment is very thrilling, that we can go to the families and say, look, there's something that you can do that's easy to do, and it's going to help your child feel better, feel more confident, their cognitive skills are going to improve, you'll be able to hope for independent living for your son or for your daughter. But this idea of empowerment, that there's something they can do. Mm-hmm. They don't have to rely on anybody else. They can do it. They can take charge. That's a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's actually that they're able to do it themselves. I wanted to touch a bit on that as well. And I mean, when you look at Mendability and you look at your story and how the company actually then got started, it feels like a lot of people who have gotten on board have been touched or involved with someone who might have some sort of disorder like that in some way. Yeah. And so has that also kind of contributed to bringing people together?
Oh, absolutely. Our first investor came to us because we had treated their daughter.
Oh, okay.
And she's now doing TED Talks. She was nonverbal. She's got her own blog. If you Google it, just look for Leah Aronoff and YOLO. She has a very powerful TED Talk on you only live once. Mm-hmm. And to have somebody like her talk about something like this, that's very social, very about embracing life and enjoying life. When she had autism and nonverbal, that's a powerful story. So yes, he came to us because of that connection. And then all the people who joined, it's because of that connection, absolutely.
It's kind of like a chain of enablement, because then you have investors, which might enable you, which then you're able to enable parents that enable the children, and then the children, it sounds like she's then able to help enable the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing that is interesting for me as well, speaking about family, is that there's definitely some family mixed in with Mendability and and how and you guys run yourself. So I wonder, I'm very curious to know from your end, because there's always a bit of a double-edged it's always a bit of a double-edged topic where some people think it's good to mix family and business, sometimes not. I mean, what's your experience kind of been in that?
Quit so many times. She's quit so many times. Everybody, the dynamics. It took us a while to find the balance where we could separate work from family. And I work with my mother, and when I call her mom, then I know it's a personal conversation. But I will, if I address her by her first name, then it's a professional conversation. It's one of those little things that we've come up with to manage the work-family balance. It's crazy. I wouldn't recommend that anybody go into business with a family member. It's just not good. It took us a long time to get there.
But do you think that under right circumstances, right company, right scenario, that then there's a certain level of harmony that you can really get to?
What got us together is the mission. It's just a calling for her, for me. I've got it's my own personal calling, nothing to do with her, and she's got her own, and that has, and all the members of the team are doing this because of the calling. This idea that we can change the lives of children, of people who are feeling sad all the time and they don't know how to get out of that, or people who cannot feed themselves anymore when they used to, with Alzheimer's, dementia. This is horrible for all those people, and we have something that's effective, that's easy to do, and it's been around for so long, and we're just here because we just sort of put the pieces together for people, but we haven't really created anything ourselves. And but this mission is what has kept us going through despite the early difficulties.
Yeah, but maybe could you explain a bit then as well what it would actually look like, the therapy itself between a child and a parent?
Okay, well, so if you have a kid with autism and he can't speak, one exercise that's given a lot to do is to have kids dip both hands simultaneously in 2 bowls of water. One will have hot water and one will have cold water. And what that does is it sends a warm signal. There's tons of receptors in the skin for all sorts of texture, pain. There's one for hot, one for cold. And so we're sending hot through to the left side of the brain and cold from the left to the right side of the brain, and they have to cross at the bridge. The corpus callosum, it's called. It's probably the main bridge, and in children with autism and a lot of neurological disorders, that bridge is smaller, and communication is not very efficient. And a lot of the tasks that you need to do involve a lot of cross-brain communication. Left trying to talk to the right side and getting some information before you can finish a task. And so expanding that, one of the ways we do that is by having that information cross through. It's very simple, very basic, and very important. Cold is a danger signal for the brain, and so it'll have to be processed efficiently. Even if it's not very good at processing it, it'll try to. Okay. And that trying to and that repetition will expand that bridge a little bit. So it's a popular exercise because kids get to play with water too, and they love it. And and so parents say, "My kid loves it way too much." And how long does it have to be? Is it okay for me to remove the bowls? He gets excited. So that's an idea.
And I'm curious as well, because a lot of these instances that we're talking about are about children with autism or a certain disorder. But what I'm also curious about is there a difference as the patient starts to get older? And I've seen that you guys have mentioned that a bit, but is the brain most malleable at that younger age, where then you can make that bridge a bit easier when someone's younger?
The younger kids are naturally more curious, and that curiosity helps the brain stay plastic longer. And over time, adults, we do the same thing, wear the same thing, eat the same thing, and that rut sort of disengages the brain a little bit. But mechanically, as an organ, the brain is plastic throughout life. There's no difference between younger years or older years. That's been established.
Okay.
And our program, through a couple of exercises, when you combine smell and touch in particular, you can trigger those mechanisms that engages the plasticity mechanisms of the brain. And so you could almost say that we do that. We can make the brain plastic on demand with our program. And we looked at 1,000 individuals doing this program, and we compared their progress rate by age groups. And there's very little difference between the age groups,
okay.
And that's quite remarkable. In fact, the older you get, the faster the progress initially. It's kind of funny. They kind of meet towards the end after looking at the progress rate after 6 months, but it's very similar.
Okay.
We haven't seen a difference. Age is really not a big difference.
And I find that interesting, and also I feel like it's not just necessarily someone who might have a deficiency where they need to bridge that, but have you guys also looked into people who just want to have better mental capacities or memory and being able to bring that back? And is there a bit of a difference then? Do you see at the rate at which people are able to make that bridge?
Well, we don't have clinical data for that. Okay. So I can only tell you what we've seen, what we've observed on a case-by-case basis, but we've had young executives who wanted to have an edge in the boardroom, wanted to be able to remember everything. Yeah. I have bad memory. I have bad memory for names, for example. There's a lot of times when I go to church, or I was like, hey, you, how's it going? And I remember when I did the program, so lazy. I did the program for about 2 months, and I could remember everything, I could remember everybody. But not just that, lots of skills. I could read faster. I felt myself being wittier. And then I felt better, so then I stopped. And it's kind of dumb that way. And then my memory is still better than it used to be, but it kind of went down a little bit after stopping the program. So we have stories like that of people who don't necessarily have their life affected by a symptom, but they want to get that edge and want to get that improvement, and they've seen it.
So where do you think this whole movement, especially with sensory therapy, where are we headed in the next? I mean, where not only is that kind of industry, but also yourself and Mendability, where are you headed maybe in the next year, but then where is really things starting to shape in the next 5 years?
A few thoughts there. Generally, I see everybody in the world more and more interested in natural things. Less artificial, more natural, everything from slow food movements to going outdoors more exercise. People are more aware of those things, and so I think our program will become familiar and comfortable. It wasn't that way 20 years ago when we started. It was very new, very weird, very strange. So I think in the future this will be a lot easier to explain and to describe. But also as a company, we've focused on autism for the last 20 years, and now we're starting to take a step back and say, okay, what next? And the what next, we're looking at two very different things. Alzheimer's, and I mentioned that earlier, and that's why it's very hot for us right now. We're starting to look for opportunities to do clinical trials to validate that what we've seen in autism can be replicated in other disorders, and we're really excited about Alzheimer's because it's a very underserved population. They had a lot of hope with this medication, and then all of a sudden they realized no, it wasn't working, and everybody's a bit disappointed with that. So we're hoping that we can come and bring some hope there. But also footballers in America and Canada have issues with concussions, and out of 110 brains that they've looked at of dead people who've since passed on, 100 out of 111, 110 had what is called CTE, which is some degenerative brain disorder. I can't remember the name of it, but 110, that's 99% of them, because of hitting their heads all the time, they had a degenerative brain disorder that led to anxiety, depression, violence, divorce rates were through the roof. there again is a population that nobody can help. They don't know what to do, and we think that with engaging the plasticity of the brain, they can recover after each game. And that's
so it's not at the end, but it's actually something they would do concurrently.
That's right. They would do it, and so it would prevent that disorder from ever occurring. And so this idea of prevention that's our first foray into that. And we'd love to see what we can do, because if you're an adult and you have a history of Alzheimer's, maybe you're worried, am I going to have Alzheimer's? And so a lot of people do Scrabbles and Sudokus and those brain games.
Yeah.
They're hoping that that's going to keep their brains engaged, exercise. But there's this aspect of enriching their environment from a sensory perspective that's ignored, and that is much more powerful at making the brain plastic than all of those things. So.
And I think there's a real market for improving your memory and all of these kind of things, but what I really like about Mendability is that you start from the science and then you really seem to build from there.
Yeah, it's the only way. I mean, you can have great ideas, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you do have to do your homework.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have, but thanks for joining me, Kim.
Cool.
And thanks for everyone for watching.